Hello everyone, and welcome to Chess with M&M. Today we will see a game happened in 1996 between one of the most greatest chess players ever, Garry Kasparov, and the most powerful engine at that time, Deep Blue. Now the story of this game is the creators of Deep Blue created this engine, and they challenged all the engines at that time, and Deep Blue beat all of them. And then they wanted to challenge the best powerful player in the world. And in that time, the world champion was Garry Kasparov. So they called Kasparov and they said, we want to challenge you. And Kasparov accepted the challenge, and he played with Deep Blue 12 game, 6 game in 1996, and the other 6 game was in 1997. So I brought for you one of the games between the most powerful human against the most powerful engine at that time. So let's see what happened. Kasparov with the white pieces and Deep Blue with the black pieces. Kasparov started by knight to f3, d5 by Deep Blue, d4, c6 and c4 by Kasparov. And here we're seeing Deep Blue going to the Slav defense by d5 and c6. E6 by Deep Blue, supporting his pawn on d5, and knight to b to d2 by Kasparov. The idea is playing knight to f3 and developing the b1 knight to the f3 square. Knight to f6 by Deep Blue, developing his knight 2, and e3 by Kasparov, opening the way for the bishop to develop it and castling. c5 by Deep Blue, hitting the center, and e3 by b3 by Kasparov, supporting his pawn on the c4. Knight to c6, developing his knight, and bishop to b2 by Kasparov. Now bishop to b2 here, the idea is playing d capture on c5 and then opening this diagonal, the a1 h8 diagonal for his bishop on the b2. So for this season here, Deep Blue played c capture on d4. Now the idea here by c capture on d4, if you capture by the bishop capture on d4, then after bishop capture on d4, here I have knight capture on d4, knight capture on d4, and then you will lose your bishop, and I will win the bishop pair advantage. And also here, example, if you captured by the knight capture on d4, then I have bishop to d6, and then supporting and controlling the e5 square to pushing e6, e5, and closing this diagonal. And the e5 pawn will become with tempo on this knight, and also it will be so strong pawn on the center, controlling the e4, the d4 and the f4 squares. So for this season here, the best move in this position is capturing by the e pawn, e capture on d4, and using this bishop on the b2 to supporting the e5 square with the pawn on the d4 when the knight jumping to the e5, knight to e5. So after e capture on d4, bishop to e7 by Deep Blue, it's preparing to castling. Rook to c1 by Kasparov. If you capture or if I capture, the file will be opened for my rook. So rook to c1, a nice move by Kasparov, castling by Deep Blue, and bishop to d3 by Kasparov. The idea is preparing to castling. Bishop to d7, making room for the rook, and castling by Kasparov. And then knight to h5 by Deep Blue. Knight to h5, I want to play knight to f4, developing my knight, threatening your bishop, and also opening the way for my f-pawn to pushing f7, f6, or f5 in the future. So after knight to h5, here Kasparov played rook to e1. The idea by rook to e1, if you push f6 or f5, then the pawn and the e6 will be so weak. So after rook to e1, knight to h5 by Deep Blue, sorry, give me your bishop on the d3, bishop back to b1, I don't want to give you my bishop, and bishop to d6 by Deep Blue, supporting his knight on the f4, but here Kasparov just played h3, g3, sorry, to kicking this knight. Knight back to g6 by Deep Blue, and knight to e5 by Kasparov, developing his knight. Rook to c8 by Deep Blue, and here Kasparov played knight capture on d7. Now knight capture on d7, strategically it's not the best move in this position, because by knight capture on d7, now you're trading your most powerful piece with the most weak piece which the black has, and it is the light squares bishop, because this light square bishop is all the diagonals get closed on it, by his pawns or by the white's pawns. So there is no useful diagonal to develop this bishop on it. So knight capture on d7 strategically it's a mistake, but Kasparov said now the black always has c capture on d4 and always has e5 and he can open the position. So he said let's capture the bishop and win the bishop pair advantage. So after knight capture on d7, queen capture on d7 by deep blue and knight to f3 by Kasparov, developing his knight. Bishop to b4, give me your rook on the e1 and rook to e3 by Kasparov. Kasparov want this rook to still on the e file to stopping any e6, e5 idea in the future. So after rook to e3, rook f to d8 by deep blue, the idea here I will capture d capture on c4 in the future and put a lot of pressure on the pawn on the d4. So after rook f to d8, h4 by Kasparov and knight back to e7 by knight g to e7 by deep blue. The idea here I want to play knight to f5, making 4 between the rook and the pawn on the d4 and then capturing d capture on d4 and then threatening this pawn on the d4. So for this season here, Kasparov said, now what do you want? This pawn on the d4? Okay. Here Kasparov played a3, give me your bishop. Bishop back to a5, b4, give me your bishop again. Bishop back to d7, to c7 and then c5. c5 and now you don't have d capture on c4 anymore. So after c5 by Kasparov, rook to e8 by deep blue. The idea here is preparing to pushing e6, e5 in the future. So after rook to e8 here, Kasparov just played queen to d3. Give me your pawn on the h7 with check. g6 preventing the threat and rook to e2 by Kasparov. Now the e5 square get controlled by 4 pieces, so there is nothing to worry about. Rook to e2 by Kasparov. The idea if you play knight to f5 and this what happened in the game, don't play knight to f5 with tempo on my rook. So after knight to f5, sorry, bishop to c3 by Kasparov. Bishop to c3, I want to play bishop to e2 and develop my bishop on this nice diagonals. And h5 by deep blue. b5 by Kasparov, give me your knight on the c6, knight c to e7 by deep blue and bishop to d2 by Kasparov. I want to play bishop to g5 or bishop to f4 to develop my bishop in the future. So after bishop to d2, king to g7 by deep blue just waiting, and a4 by Kasparov. a4, I want to play a5 and taking a huge space on the queen side. So after a4, rook a8 by deep blue, sorry. The idea here, deep blue want to play something like a6 or a5 and then capturing and opening the files for his pieces, because if you're looking at the blackest position, we'll see the blackest pieces is stuck on this two ranks. And he cannot do anything because the white has too huge space and the black cannot move his pieces. So the idea by rook 8 to e8 is trying to opening some files and diagonals for his pieces. But here Kasparov played a5. a5, the idea, if you played a6 and this is what deep blue played, I will play b6. b6, everything is closed. And your pieces will still stuck on this two ranks. So after b6 by Kasparov, bishop back to b8 by deep blue. Bishop back to b8 and bishop to c2 by Kasparov. And here if you're looking to the blackest position, we will see this bishop on the b8 is stuck, cannot move to anywhere. All the squares get controlled by the whitest pawns. So this bishop is stuck on the b8, and also if this bishop doesn't move, so the black, rook on the a8 will still stuck on the a8. So technically the black here down 2 pieces. So let's see what deep blue done with this. So after bishop to c2 by Kasparov, the idea is playing rook to a1 and then bishop to a4 and attacking the queen and the rook. Here deep blue played knight to c6, trying to closing the diagonal. Bishop to a4 by Kasparov and rook to e7 by deep blue. Rook to e7 guarding the queen and moving away from this dangerous diagonal. And here after rook to e7 and bishop to c3 by Kasparov, deep blue played knight to e5. Now the idea by knight to e5, if you capture my queen, I will capture your queen on the d3. And also if you capture my knight, I will capture your bishop. So here, Kasparov accepted the challenge and he played a d capture on e5. And after queen capture on a4, Kasparov played knight to d4. Knight to d4, let's trade some pieces. Knight capture d4, queen capture to d4, challenging the queen on the a4, and queen back to d7 by deep blue. Now here, if you try to play something like queen capture on d4, it will be a big blunder. Why? Because after queen capture on d4 and bishop capture on d4, now the bishop on the b8 still stuck on the b8, and you cannot move it to anywhere because all the squares still controlled by the white's pawns. So if you try to open the diagonal example to move the bishop by f6, then the white here has f4, and after f capture e5, f capture e5, the bishop on the b8 still stuck on the b8, and the rook also still stuck on the a8. So, and here the white will just play something like rook f2, rook f1, and then developing himself on the king side, and then he will win the game. So for this season here, after queen capture on d4, deep blue just played queen to d7. He don't want trading the queens. Bishop to d2 by Kasparov. The idea is playing bishop to g5 and then bishop to f6 and develop my bishop on the h6 square. How you will prevent this? There is no way to prevent this. Rook to e8 by deep blue, bishop to g5 by Kasparov, rook to c8 by deep blue, trying to do something, but there is nothing to do. Bishop to f6 by Kasparov, and king to h7 by deep blue. And here after king to h7, Kasparov played c6. The idea by c6, if you capture b capture on c6, and this is what happened in the game, I will play queen to c5. And after king to h6, I will play rook to b2, threatening b7 and to making fork between the rooks. So only move to blocking, to preventing b7, b6, b7 push is playing queen to b7, rook to b4 by Kasparov, and in this position the engine Deep Blue just resigned the game. Now technically Deep Blue didn't design the game, the creators of Deep Blue resigned the game because the engines doesn't resign, alright? So after rook to b4, yeah, the engine resigned the game. Why? Because here the black has nothing to move actually. Now this you cannot move this queen because this queen has to still on the b7 to preventing b6 b7 push, and you cannot move this rook to anywhere. Also this bishop you cannot move it to anywhere, and this rook has to keep eye on the c6 square, and all the pawns get stopped by the white's pieces. And also here if you try to do something like queen to h7 trying to waiting, then here the white has just can play something like rook to b3, and after example king to h6, here the white can play rook queen to b4, king to h7, example rook to c3, king to h6, and then rook to c6, rook to c5, sorry, and after king to h7, queen to c3, and after something like king to h6, here the white can just play can just play rook capture on c6. Now here if you trade the pieces, rook capture, queen capture, and after queen capture, rook capture, then and after example king to h7, then I have rook to c8, rook to c8, threatening checkmate on the h8 square, and also threatening bishop to d8, bishop to c7, and to trading this pieces, and then pushing b7, b8, and queen. So, and even here, if you didn't trade the pieces and you play something like rook to e8, here the white can just play something like queen to e8 check, and after king to h7, here the white can just play something like rook to c7. And after bishop capture, rook capture, threatening the queen, and checkmate on the f7. Example here, if you play something like queen to b8, then rook capture on f7 when rook capture on f7, and after king to g8, then queen to h6 will come, and queen to h6, yeah, threatening checkmate on the g7 square. There is no way to prevent this checkmate. So for this season here, after rook to b4 in this position, the engine Deep Blue just resigned the game. So hope you enjoyed the video, and then from it, please don't forget us by the like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.